Welcome to the Andrew D'Angelo podcast.
Constant Constance. Each week, Andrew, renowned jazz saxophonist and brain cancer survivor, invites us to look at the many worlds of his guests, with conversations that cover all the arts, human resilience, a little bit of politics, and a lot of humour.
You can't fail to have a fantastic time.
Hey everyone, welcome. We are here today with Charlotte Greve, who is from Germany. She is a saxophonist, a singer, a composer, and an improviser. I mean, what else is there, folks? Welcome. How are you doing, Charlotte?
I'm very good, thank you.
Quite a time since we've seen each other, right?
Maybe I know.
Like a couple years or something like this?
Probably, yeah. I think at the Owl the last time, probably.
I think the Owl, but maybe then that house concert you did in Brooklyn.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that was such an amazing show. And it was totally what do you call that? Like a fluke, because your drummer, Jim Black, was staying next door while I came to town to make that concert. And I was outside talking to him. I said, where are you going? He goes, I'm doing this concert with Charlotte. And I think Simon Jerem was on that show. And so I just got in the Uber with Jim and we drove over to the that was a great house concert. Bravo. What a great show.
Thank you. That I was so happy to see. It was very unexpected, but
it was unexpected for me too. I mean, Jim was like, yeah, you want to get in the car? I'm going over there. I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Amazing. I remember now.
Was that your band Wood River, or was that just okay, cool. And is that, I mean, you're in Brooklyn now, or New York anyway, right?
Yes.
But you went back to Germany, right?
I did for 6 months. So I spent most of the pandemic here, and then I went over there because it looked like things were opening up a little bit more and you could play shows and stuff. And then I played like one show, and then basically then there was total lockdown and then nothing. And then straight into the nothingness. I still had like some streaming gigs and stuff, but used the time to see family and just hang out in Berlin.
Right, because you're from Germany. Are you from Berlin, or where are you from in Germany?
I'm from the countryside near Hamburg. So like an hour from Hamburg, more or less, in the countryside. But I was living in Berlin for 5.5 years before I moved to New York.
Right. And so you and I met, well, basically, and I hope this doesn't embarrass you or anything, but you came to take a one-off lesson with me at one point, right?
It wasn't just one, it was a couple, actually, like two or three maybe in Brooklyn, and then one when you were on tour and you played in Berlin, and you stayed at a hotel near A-Train, and we did another lesson in the hotel room, which I remember. Very good lessons. That's how we met, kind of. I think I saw you at a show in Brooklyn or somewhere in New York, and we got together.
Right. And I think oddly enough, I'm not sure if we've actually played together. Have we? Like, other than those lessons, right? Have we ever actually played together?
I think only where this picture was made at Douglas Street Collective, when you did that like improv salon thing, we played there. Remember?
Yep.
That picture that you posted? Yeah. That's the one time I think we played in like a collective scenario.
Right. Yeah, I was Polly is the one who took that photo, and we were reminiscing about how fun that night was. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes the salons that I hold, no matter the location, whether it's that collective or I do them in my house now, or I used to have a loft space, that could be such fun nights. I don't know, that photo, that evening. Paulie, I think he says he feels like he said something inappropriate to you that night. I don't know if you remember that, but he does.
To me?
Yeah, I don't know. Something about, you're really good looking. I'm going to take a photo of you, something like this. And
well, I don't really remember. It was
good.
Fine.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I was like, Paulie, just let it go, man. I'm sure it's all fine.
It's fine.
So as far as Wood River, which I'm learning doing this show, is I like to hone in and focus on aspects of people's music that I just personally enjoy. And it's not always the thing that my guest wants to focus on. So, right. I mean, the record that you made, More Than I Can See, is just absolutely, to me, it's very forward thinking. The music is beautiful and your singing is amazing. The videos associated with it, right, are beautiful. And I was curious because then somebody on my social media said, could you tell her to talk about the new record, the trio record with Vinny Sperrazza and Chris Tordini? And I'm like, oh shit, right. So I listened to those 2 tracks, which I had listened to a while ago. And then I was like, I should probably listen to the whole record, which I did. But there's such a contrast here between those 2 projects. I mean, I can keep talking and pursue my questions, but one is super acoustic and, dare I say, I don't know, very much rooted in the tradition of jazz. And the other ones is, again, I think either in the present or if nothing else, like very forward thinking. Yeah. And even electronic, Totally.
Yeah. It's just 2 very different paths. And also the trio is a collective. So I only wrote like 2 or 3 songs on the album and the rest is from Vinny and Chris. And it's just very much a collective trio. We all bring the music to the table and it's, as you said, super acoustic, very just like straightforward saxophone trio. And Wood River is more my baby. I write all the music and it's a very personal project because I started singing a couple of years ago and then wrote lyrics for the first time. Like it's still like very fresh, but just kind of an outlet that it's really important to me at this point. And just different routes, and they came out like not that far off from each other, but just like different parts of my musical life, I guess.
Right. So my emphasis was going to be on the Wood River record. Yeah. Is the song, it's simply called C. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this great comment while I was writing for this. C, fuck, this song is so amazing, like, and 10 exclamation points. But I didn't, there was no punctuation. So it kind of works as a sentence, but I was really talking about the song C. Yeah. And then I was going to ask, did you write those lyrics? Because they're written in the, on the Bandcamp page, you can read the lyrics. So I don't know. I'm just very impressive. Is that your first try at writing lyrics? Or?
Yeah, that was actually because that song existed without lyrics first. So I was just kind of singing the notes, that melody without lyrics, which I found out is actually much harder than singing with lyrics. Keeping a note in tune without words, much harder, because you're just da, and it's very easy to have it out of tune and all the things. And we had played the song a couple of times at shows and it worked, but then somehow this lyric came to me, and that was actually the very first lyric I ever wrote. Wow. And it was kind of finished, and then I was thinking about it a little bit, and I thought I want a little bit of help with a native speaker and someone that I trust a lot with, also with the way he writes lyrics. And I went to Greve McMurray, who ended up also producing this album, and we worked on it a little bit together. We went over it and swapped a couple of words around, and and then the lyric that's on the record is that.
Right. And native speaker, you mean a native English speaker, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's, I do not consider myself to be an amazing prose writer whatsoever. Yeah. But the idea of being able to read the lyrics is important. It's been important to me as a kid. Even I would listen to rock bands and you don't have the record and you could read the lyrics to the song. And I was like, damn, this is really well written. I have to ask Charlotte about it. And again, I couldn't be author level editor, but I could understand. But then I'll admit, maybe it was 2 or 3 nights ago. Then I don't know, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. I put that song on just one more time to really get into it. And I actually kind of teared up. I just think it's just very moving. I don't know what it is. I don't even know, what your intention was. I mean, if you want to tell people what your intention was behind the song, if you don't mind. Yeah, I would love to know. Never mind that the lyrics kind of tell you what the intention is, but what was your intention, I should say?
So it's a topic that has been on my mind a lot recently over the past few years. And I kind of dedicated a whole other project to that idea, but this song has it. It's just that idea is living within the song, which is how our character traits are in like many of our character traits in the way that we behave and the way that we operate is rooted in generations that came before us. Like the first line of the lyric is walking through the memory of my grandma's granny, which means like there's this narrative of, in my case, like my grandma and her mother, how that is just, it carries over all these years. And you kind of, if you look at it, if you're not afraid to look at your own past or the past of your family, that it enables you to understand yourself and your own behavior better. It's not always easy or like a joyride, because there's also it can be a dark side to it, but also a very beautiful side, and something that just helps you understand your own actions. And if you go there, you can actually be richer in some way, because you just make these connections and you feel really rooted in who you are and where you're coming from.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now it makes me even more emotional about the song, and I won't go into my own, travels to understanding my family history better, but it's it's something that I don't think a lot of people, especially a lot of Americans, I'll generalize, are willing to do, because maybe they don't want to look at the past, or they don't want to know what grandma did or grandpa did, or my great grandma or great grandfather or whatever. And so it's maybe there should be a qualifier in the lyrics. When I say that, I'm saying, look and see what you see. And take that. I did a lot of work, especially when I had brain cancer, on this, especially with my dad and his parents, just having to understand that, none of them really loved themselves. And that was a big issue on that side of that, if we're cut in half, that side of me is my dad's family. And Dad, I love you. I'm not trying to say anything, but, I had to understand that it took him a lot to even get me into the world, let alone become who he was when his parents really did not love themselves or even like themselves, maybe. Right. And so I was going to say that first before, but it's like, it's one of those things where, I've gotten into hot water by assuming or intuiting certain things, but that's really beautiful, Charlotte. And I almost am sad that it's the third song on the record, because I wonder how many people get there,
Right. I know. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I've been doing, and not necessarily on the podcast, I got this hair going across my face here. One of the things I've been doing, not on the show, just in general, is asking people, name the third song off any record. Michael Jackson, the Beatles, any record, name the third song. And totally crickets, right?
Yeah.
And even like record geeks, they might be able to name a couple, but they're like, yeah. And I even asked a couple of musician friends of mine, name the third song on your own record. And they're like,
good question.
I even have trouble with that, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, all right, I'm picking on that song, but Sven, do you know who that is?
I actually don't.
You used his quote, or your manager, Sven Schneidelbeiter, I think. Schreiber.
Yeah.
might know Charlotte Greve as the leader and saxophonist of Elizabeth Quartet, but what she does on this Wood River album is something amazing and completely different. However, blah 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 blah, and favorite track C. I was like, all right, so I'm not the only one who likes this song.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it wasn't the right opener because it's very personal, and I wanted the album to open with something that's just kind of very in your face.
Right.
And so I did that.
That's a great gesture. Boom.
Yeah. Just like, here, you deal with this now.
Right.
But then after 2 of that kind of song, I feel like you're ready for like something that requires a little bit of focus and just willing to go there, like willing to go, like dig a little bit deeper in your past, and also not be afraid of the darker sides of your past that are just in your body also and in your system, that without anybody even wanting to, but like you get all the good stuff and all the bad stuff. That's just how it is. And I think we just can learn so much from that and be less afraid, just to understand, that is why I'm also carrying this dark side, because they have been carrying this dark side. Or like you're saying about your family, each generation has to learn something new, but they can learn the best if they also appreciate and realize what happened before them.
So maybe people don't remember that third song on records because that's the third song's job, is to send people into a different headspace or an emotional space where they're starting to contemplate, and they've heard the 2 bangers at the front, and now it's like, or like you said, in your face kind of thing. And then it's time, it's time to sit back and just, listen to this one. Yeah. And I'm assuming a lot there, but maybe you're onto something. That's why nobody remembers the name of it. Maybe they can hum a little bit of the melody or something, but maybe that's what it's supposed to do. I mean, and this is intellectual. I'm not remembering this because I remembered I had to look it up. The third song on one of my records is called I Love You.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what that song is supposed to do.
Totally.
Like learning to love yourself. Can you do that? Yeah. And I'm sure people are, somebody reviewed and said, I cannot put on Andrew's blah, 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 D'Angelo's song, I Love You, casually. I just cannot, because I understand what it's attempting to do, and it's doing it. And it was the biggest compliment in a review I think I've ever received.
Yeah.
And I actually messaged the guy. I was like, thank you, man. Thank you. And I didn't even realize that for me, I was at a party and somebody put it on just in the background. I was like, you have to take this off. I can't.
Yeah, totally.
You must, if somebody put C or one of your songs on in the background, you're like, no, this is not music for, it's not a fan blowing air out of the room like I have on right now. Right.
Totally. Yeah. I agree.
Interesting. I think Charlotte just got onto an element here that I'll have to put into my casual interviews with people as I ask them, like, name a third song on record. Yeah. Now I'll have to add. And speaking of history, and this is where I'm going to go into interviewer mode. So you grew up outside of Hamburg. Is that Bavaria? Are you from Bavaria?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm from the north.
Right.
And it is like, I grew up like half with my dad, half with my mom. My mom moved with us to a smaller town, also near Hamburg, a little closer. And my dad continues to have a farm, but like a hobby farm. He was a teacher before he got retired. So it was like a half small town growing up and half farm life with like horses and sheep.
Cool. Yeah. So the crux of that question is, how does somebody, because I think we've talked about this before casually at some point when we were on tour and a lesson, how did you come to playing the saxophone? I mean, you're growing up in a small town, your dad maybe has half a farm, or whatever, and teaches. How does the saxophone find Charlotte Greve, in Germany?
It is a very good question. So the way it happened was that I, before I played the saxophone, I played classical flute for 10 years. And I wanted to become a classical flute player.
Okay.
when I presented that idea to my teacher, like I also did like competitions and that whole thing, it always kind of stressed me out to play in front of anyone with the flute, like doing these sonatas and everything. But I still was like, but I want to become a musician, so I guess that's what I have to do. And then he said, don't do it. It's the most depressing job. And I was like, that is depressing that you think I should.
That's horrible, man.
Saying that to a very motivated 16-year-old, like what? That's
right.
not good.
That's your teacher's advice is don't do it. Don't do it. Oh
I know. I found it so sad. I was like, well.
Sorry, I'm only laughing because it's insane.
Yeah. It was not a good scene. I was like, why is he saying that? Maybe I could get in a different orchestra than he's in the small town. Like maybe I don't want to do that, but maybe something different. But anyway, he was like, don't do it. You're gonna get so depressed. It's the worst. I'm like, wow, okay. And then I went to these jazz workshops because I was playing also jazz flute at some point. I started improvising on the flute with my brother, just playing guitar and telling me, oh, these are the chords. And I just played by ear. And we did these cassette tapes for my dad, just playing songs and kind of improvising. And from that, like learning how to play by ear with my brother, I joined like jazz workshops, little jazz bands, everything with the flute. And people always were like, yeah, cool, but we couldn't really hear you. So just because sometimes I didn't have a mic or the mic was very shitty. So I was like, whatever, you know?
Right. So, but wait a minute. You're glossing over a lot here. First of all, we're talking about what, like your teenage years, or are we talking about?
Yes, early teenage years with the flute. So I didn't start the saxophone until I was 16.
Right. But already then, for a lot of people thinking, you know, again, hour out of Hamburg, Germany, small town, you're saying I'm playing in these jazz bands, plural, and things like this. I mean, what? So like,
yeah,
there were like a million like school bands in your town or something? Or I'm not trying to make fun, but it just sounds like, yeah, I was playing in all these bands, man, but they couldn't hear me. And I'm like, really? Like where?
No, but it was like super like student level music school bands and school bands, you know, like imagine there was like an after school jazz program in my high school.
Cool.
And we were super beginners, you know, but we had a couple of really motivated teachers, and they all, because it's a small town, they kind of knew the people from the music school. So they would be like, oh, I have the student, maybe she can come join your beginner jazz combo at the music school. And then one came to the other, like playing a lot of big band, like really student school big band, super basic, but there was a good network of also an exchange to Paris with other big bands, like all student stuff, but really, especially for a small town, like so many things to offer. And even a jazz workshop every year that was kind of big, with like musicians coming in from Hamburg that were awesome and inspiring. And it was good because in a way then it can be easier than in a bigger city, because it's just a handful of students that are really into it and that really want to do it. And then you get a little bit more support that way because there's just not that many.
Right. Understandable. But then also you're going to have people teaching them. So there's trumpet players, there's saxophone, there's flute players, there's drummers, trombone, there's bass, there's piano, there's guitar. I mean, then you have to have somebody teaching all these kids. And by the way, I don't care about the level. I'm just impressed at the enormity of how you're casually saying, there's all these jazz bands, we have these people coming. And I don't really think I get a lot of people asking me, hey, I'm trying to get my son or daughter into a music program because their high school or junior high dropped their program. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know, talk to the government. And these are all people from the US, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's something that, I mean, I grew up the way you did. I mean, there was bands at every school. There were jazz programs at every school. And if not in school, then before or after school.
Right.
But I just don't think it's that way right now. I mean, I don't know how many jazz programs are left in, or even just music programs are left in American schools. I don't know. I'm not trying to be dark. It's just it's the reality. What?
Totally. It was definitely a special thing. I mean, at the time, I just thought, oh, that's normal, cool. I guess that's
right. Me too. I didn't think about it. Jazz band was period 3 or whatever, period 2, whatever it was. And you just took it for granted. You signed up for that class, you know, you made the band, and it was just like history class or, you know, whatever.
Yeah. For us, it was always after school or then like even later in the afternoon or whatever, going to music school and stuff. But somehow we just got offered these things, and my parents were always like very encouraging, like, yeah, you should do that. Sure, you should go improvise on your flute. Do it. You know?
That's so cool.
But I mean, that is a big deal because it gives you a lot of trust that you can just do it.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a beautiful thing, and that really shaped my whole childhood because you got a lot of energy from this kind of like community.
So before we take a quick break, can we get to the moment when you decided to transition to saxophone from flute? Because I didn't let you get there. Yeah.
So, right, I was improvising on flute. It was really fun, hard to hear sometimes. So there was this saxophone player actually in one of the music school beginner combos, and she played alto, and I was like, that's cool. You know, I was looking up to her. I was like, that's pretty cool. I kind of want to play alto. I didn't want to play tenor ever.
Right.
Like, no. I just didn't want to. I wasn't into it at all. And then whatever, maybe I borrowed a tenor from someone. I was trying a little bit. And I was like, telling my parents, I really want to play saxophone. And sure, like I could borrow this tenor, but you know, it would be really cool if I could play alto. I was very specific.
Wow.
And then my grand uncle? Like the uncle of my dad.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that is. Uncle once removed or whatever. Your dad's, right.
My dad's uncle.
Yeah.
He was a collector. He would like collect all these things from flea markets. He was also kind of messy with it, like collecting shit so much.
A hoarder, I think. I'm a hoarder these days, right?
A little bit.
Okay.
Like on the verge to that. Like interesting character. Definitely someone where we're like, yeah, he is kind of on a different planet, but also cool because he also had a bunch of violins, so many violins, and some really good ones. He was like, yeah, I just got it at these flea markets. He had like 20 violins or whatever that he would like trade with and like sell and buy more. And then at one point he calls my dad and he's like, I have this alto saxophone, you want it? And my dad was like, we might want it actually for Charlotte because she's mentioning the saxophone. And it was the Selmer Super Action 80 Series 2.
Wow.
And that was the horn when I took my first lesson with you that I had, because that was the one horn I played before this.
So is that how you got all your saxophones in your life? Like just like this weird karma where it's well, I don't know. I have the saxophone lying around. Maybe Charlotte should be playing this saxophone.
Yeah. And it was cool because it was an alto. And my dad was like, so it was right before I had my confirmation, right? And he's like, well, Uncle Theo is going to give you half of this. And I'm going to take the other half for your confirmation. I was like, cool. And I was on the farm and I had like my farm clothes on. And there's this picture, super dirty clothes, like so messy, like everything is a mess. And he's like, you want to try it? And I'm like, and I could play a scale. And my dad was like, she can play a scale, like that's insane.
Wow,
but
cool.
Because of the flute, it was the same fingering, right?
Same fingerings, like, pretty much, yeah.
And it sounded really crappy, and my head got really red because it was so exhausting.
Right.
But he was like, cool, like that's a good thing. You should definitely get it if you can already play the scale. First thing you do. I was like, nice. And so that's how that started.
Amazing. I get asked in interviews a lot, like, you know, why did I start playing saxophone? And my parents said, you're going to play an instrument. Somehow they thought I was musical. And I was like 10 or something. And they showed me in the newspaper back then, a real newspaper, an instrument store. And it had a bunch of illustrations of instruments. And I was like, I want to play that instrument. And same thing. I didn't want the tenor because somehow the curved neck bothered me. I don't know why, but I just wanted that one thing like that. And they're like, all right, we're going to go rent you one. So we basically started the saxophone for the same reason, if I may be so bold, is it's like, it just looked cool.
Yeah. It looked cool. It sounded cool.
Right.
And
I don't know if I'm not sure if I had ever heard a saxophone at that point. Anyway, what?
Yeah, but definitely not the tenor. Somehow there was something, and it never changed. I was like, no, tenor is great. There are so many great tenor players. Obviously, like, of course we agree, but like, I didn't want it. I was like, no.
We were talking about, once again, your project, Wood River, and you said you have a larger scale version of it coming, something you said with the choir, and you've been working on it for a while.
Yes, I've been working on it for probably the past 4 or 5 years almost now.
Wow.
And it's been a long time coming, and it is a piece, about a 1-hour piece for Wood River plus a choir. We recorded it in Berlin. I also recorded part of it here, and it's called Sediments We Move, and it'll come out later this year, and I'm really excited about it because exactly that message that we talked about in that song C is like exactly that whole idea of where are we coming from, what are our roots, who is influencing us in our lives and is shaping our character along the way. That is the idea of that whole piece, kind of like in nature, how sediments are being carried sometimes for months and years, over long distances and taking different shapes, like stones taking different shapes because of water, like that idea, basically. Family, friends, your social network mirrored in nature and vice versa. And my brother wrote the lyrics to that, Julius Greve, and I'm just very excited that it's gonna come out soon.
Right. I mean, that sounds amazing. And I mean, with the choir, what are we talking about here? Like a 20-piece choir, or a 50-piece choir, or a 12-piece choir?
We did it in different versions because we played it live a bunch of times already, in Germany only, sadly, but hopefully soon also in Brooklyn. The premiere was with 60 people.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, I know. That was really fun. But the recording, it was easier to make it with a smaller scale. It was like 27 people.
Right.
Yeah.
That just sounds like a brilliant project. I when you said, over years, whatever you said, weeks, months, I mean, a rock can be weathered for decades.
Totally. Yes.
And so I think it's the same for us. I mean, and there are people, and even some who I've had on my show, who say that, all of that like memory gets stored in our cells. Okay. Yes. So, or you can even go into your DNA. So whether you're aware of it or not, if your dad, was beaten by his father, you may not know the story, but it's in your DNA.
Yes.
And that's a horrible example, because it could be a lovely example where your dad was nurtured by his mom and maybe spoiled, and that's in your DNA. And or you grew up, with a lot of money, and now you don't have money, and that is that a fair? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you're shaking your head yes. So I'm assuming that you would agree with that.
All kinds of like behavior or character traits that are part of your character, are in part coming from family, extended family, but also friends and whoever influenced you, even teachers, along the way.
Right.
Like when I met you, for instance, for a few lessons, you had an impact on me and on my way of thinking about being on stage, and the way you can play one note on the alto. Like our lessons together changed me, for good. Like it just like put a thing into my system that ever since didn't leave, which I think is an amazing thing. Sometimes, of course, you can have an encounter with someone that puts something on you that is negative and dark, and it also never leaves. It triggers like some kind of fear, and it's just there. But also, family, but also friends and people that you meet along the way are making the puzzle complete, and it continues, you know. It's like it just continues, and I just find it super interesting if we could like put colors or something in our body that shows, oh look, here's a tiny part of Andrew still shining through, and here's this part of my high school friend that knows me since I'm 5 or whatever, is also shining through. And it's just so many layers in one person that I find it super interesting to like take the magnifying glass and be like, oh, look at that, you know, look at how far back that goes.
Right. So I agree. And, you know, what I'm like, I don't even know now, 30 years out of my college years, but I had this teacher, not in college, pretty elderly gentleman. And I'll never forget my first lesson with him. He's like, you played too many notes. And he goes, it's very virtuosic. I'm very proud of your technique. And you play everything very well, but you play way too many notes. Yeah. And so we're just going to practice playing like 3 notes for the whole lesson until we get those 3 notes in a way. And I, like you said, it sticks to you.
Yeah.
And that's for me, 30 years since, or maybe even longer than that. Maybe I'm like under exaggerating to hide my age, but I just, it's those experiences that really stick with me. Or like when you came to my house and I had randomly, maybe a week prior, gone to get my saxophone repaired, and my repairman had this alto, and he goes, I don't know why, but I think you're supposed to have this horn. And he goes, I'll sell it to you for a good price. And I didn't really need a saxophone, but I bought it. And then you came to my house, and then what? I mean, yeah. What's your version of this story? I'm kind of telling my side of it, but
I mean, it was a time, I forget the year, but it was something like 2010 or so. Between 2009 and 2011, like probably 2010.
I don't remember either. Yeah,
something like that. I mean, quite a long time ago, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And I came for a lesson, and we're kind of talking about all these things, and you're asking me about my name and how there's 2 T's in my name, and how that makes me, or like how that's a sign that I'm stubborn. I remember all these things, like these little details. I was like, yeah. And we're playing, and at the time I had played the Selma Super Action 80 ever since my uncle gave it to me, right? And I still had that, and I liked it, but I was like, oh, these people are playing these vintage horns. I wish I could like try one of those. So I was kind of looking for a horn, but also not actively looking, because I'm like that with equipment. If it works, it works. I'm like, fine. But if something comes my way, like Glenn did,
right.
It's like, whoa, you're like, oh, I have this horn, you want to try it? And it was in really bad shape, I remember. The neck was all wiggly and whatever. And
sorry.
No.
I don't remember that.
It didn't matter, because you were like, play it. And I was already like, oh my God, I'm playing this horn that you used to play. It was a whole thing. I'm like, okay. And I played it, and it has a silver neck. I have it right there. It has a silver neck.
You can show it if you want. Yeah. I'm totally cool with that.
Let me grab it. It has this like silver neck, right? Which is not the original, but it doesn't matter. And it's a radio improved, and there are actually not that many radio improved in the world even.
No, that's amazing.
Very few. And you were like, play it. And it was so resonant. I had never played a horn like that just like vibrates your entire body is like vibrant.
Right.
Just playing a note. And you look, it was a very like magic moment. You look at me, you're like, I think this is your horn. I think so too. It was very like, groove vibes, you know. And then
and it's also, just so everybody understands, I'm not a car salesman or something. I mean, I really felt like, oh my God, this is just like, if I'm going to be a teacher, I'm not going to be the one that says, don't go into music, it's depressing. I'm going to be like, man, you just lit up when you started playing that instrument. Yeah. That's who I am, at least.
Yeah. And then we were improvising a bit, like you were playing and I was playing with this horn, and it was like, because I wasn't used to a vintage horn, so the intonation was all like crazy, but it had
shame on you.
But then it had such a character that I was like, whoa, I have to get this. And then I don't know if I decided that day or like a couple days later, I like literally went to an ATM with my German bank card and like took out so many 20s, just like all this cash. I was like, thank you, here it is. And so the horn and the way that we were talking about sound, you and me, and you were like telling me about your approach and just the way that it all came together, like opened up for the first time a very spiritual connection between me and the instrument that ever since really helped me to transport my message on stage, which is really amazing.
Well, freaking good job, because I mean, whether people enjoy your music or not is not up to us, right? That's up to them.
Yeah.
But you definitely have found a way to capture and communicate your vibration, if I dare say, and hand it over to people, whether live, like that house show we talked about, or with Wood River, where there's probably a lot of edits or overdubs, or at least there's some effects and stuff like this, or the acoustic, the trio. There's just something about, I was actually really glad whoever said, I want to hear her talk about a trio record. I was like, all right, you're right. I should. And it's like, it's just all there. And one of the things that is interesting, again, about our connection, never mind our childhood, and I want to play that thing, is I got a call in 1996, when no one can remember exactly, 96 or 98, from a friend, and he goes, I think I found your saxophone. I was like, what? I had a Yamaha at the time, which I loved. And I said, what do you mean? I have my saxophone. He goes, no. I think I found your saxophone. You got to come check out this horn. I was like, all right. And that's the horn I still play. Oh. And for those who are interested, a Conn New Wonder 2, and which I got from the original owner, who was in his 80s at the time and didn't play anymore and wanted somebody to play it. He didn't want it to be, just kind of sold off and then sold off. And I remember the first, and again, that horn was in terrible shape when I got it, but I was like, oh my God. I think I made a record like a week later on that thing. I think maybe with Reed Anderson, The Vastness of Space or something. Oh man, yeah. But, and everybody's like, you're not playing your Yamaha? It's like, no, this is my horn. Yeah. So I'm just trying to bond with you. I'm not trying to change the focus or anything like that.
I totally get it, because I don't think everybody has this kind of experience. Like, some people have a more pragmatic relationship with their instruments, which is just as good, but like,
no, we're better, man.
It's just, it's just a special thing. And I think whatever works helps you open up your thing and how you transport that message. It's really cool. It's like a different layer that's just like, yes, this is supposed to happen. And also at the time, you gave me this copper bracelet. I
gave you the copper bracelet,
which I still have.
Oh my God. I totally forgot about. I mean, I'm remembering now because I tried to look for it a few months ago. I think it was mine.
Of course it was yours. And you were like, another one. And I was like, wow. The cover, because I couldn't, like, I had all this trouble with my hands with the tendinitis and whatever. And you would like take this copper bracelet, and I was like wearing it for years. But now I don't have trouble anymore with my hands, so I'm not wearing it anymore. Right. But anyway, it was a very spiritual journey then with the instrument, and yeah, I think I'm not gonna change it ever again. Who knows?
Who knows? Right? Who knows?
But for now, and it's been many years already, I still love it so much. Yeah.
So I really, really encourage people to give your music some time. And by that, I mean, give it some time. Your music is not, if I say shallow, that means that other music is shallow. So your music is very deep and very thoughtful and very from the heart. And it may take a few times through to go, oh, all right then. All right, there's a lot going on here. Yeah. But in that context, Charlotte, if you don't mind me asking and just kind of shifting gears here. Totally. One of the things I've been asking everybody is if they've had any experience with either, sexism or racism or homophobia, either in the music industry or outside of it, and where they think we could, I guess, move forward to, or what changes we could make to have things be better than they are, at least currently at this moment in time.
Yeah, definitely. I think because I know many stories from female colleagues of mine, or, also male colleagues of mine that experienced some terrible moments in their musician life. And I think in that way I've been mostly pretty lucky, because I was surrounded by a lot of encouraging other musicians, colleagues, mostly men. But I rarely had a bad feeling with them. And I just consider myself really lucky for that. But still, I had some moments that were very confusing and very, like, threw me off a lot, like from audience members coming to me in between sets and like touching my back and being like, I thought you're not that beautiful, but then kind of you became more beautiful as you were playing. Just like inappropriate shit
wow.
That I was so shocked, and I'm annoyed that I couldn't say anything in the moment. But that is what happens sometimes, right? Somebody says this really over the top thing to you, and you're so shocked that you're just like, I'm gonna go backstage right now. That's all I could do. And I told my band, and I was like, this guy would have never said that to you guys, like all 3 male musicians, right? Never would have happened, and things like this happened numerous times, where it was just very superficial, but also like totally degrading me as, listen to me, I'm a musician that was playing on stage, and you think you can come to me and touch me and talk about how I look, why? And anyway, these kind of experience I had like a bunch of times, and luckily they were outweighed by the way that I was treated by my colleagues most of the time, because I always felt like most of the time I'm part of a project because of the way I play, and not because I'm a woman.
Right.
And at the same time, what really, really bothers me is that in an effort to bring women, like, I'm now talking mostly about that side, right? Women to the forefront, and like have more women in bands and have more women in festivals and whatever. The pendulum swings a little bit too far to one side. Like, oh, there's a jazz festival only for women-led bands.
Right.
I don't think that is the answer. And I wish, like, that would be my wish for the future, that we come to a point where we don't have to talk about, oh, look how there's a woman and actually 3 women in this band and it still sounds good, where we don't have to talk about it anymore, because it's just like, if the music is strong, it doesn't matter who's playing it. If it's a female or a male or transgender or anything, that it can just be about the music mostly, and that bands will be more diverse in all the ways, in a more natural way. And I know that's a really hard thing to achieve, but I would wish that can happen, because so many times I know I've been asked because I'm a woman, and from like, not like close colleagues to me, but like festivals or something. They were like, oh yeah, it's a good sell because she has that picture, and it's just, that's good in that way. And of course you can use that to your advantage, but it always has like a bad aftertaste. And yeah, I don't mean as that, oh yeah, she sounds good for being a woman kind of thing.
Right. And I agree. And I know these are sensitive subjects, but I did what I think was called the first ever queer jazz festival. Mm-hmm. And it was in Washington, D.C. or maybe Philadelphia. And everything was cool. The fees were great. They took care of us and everything. And then it was time after, you have to interview with NPR.
Right.
And the interviewer was, NPR, and how does it feel to be on the first ever, I think it was the first ever, queer jazz festival. And then I just started getting angry.
Yeah.
I'm like, did I just get asked here because I'm a gay man? You know, I mean, I don't know. Something about it just bugged me.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that I understand your experience, but I agree. We shouldn't be asking people to do things just because.
Right.
It should. Siren, hold on. I have a friend, a more spiritual friend, who says that's Archangel Michael when you hear a siren like that. But I don't know. We hear sirens so much these days. I have no idea. But yeah, so I hope that that can help you understand that I can relate. I was so mad they didn't publish my interview because I was so cranky. I was like, why were we using the word queer in the first place?
Yeah.
Should we be using that word? I mean, I grew up being called queer, and that was not a good thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's really tricky that way because like, oh, look how we're giving you a stage. But then the moment that you point that out so much, I know it's like from a good intention, like to like to make it more equal or whatever in general, but I don't know. It's tricky because even if you give me a stage, I almost feel like oh, thank you that I can like be at this like all women led situation. But honestly, I just want to be in the music situation, you know? Right. I just want to be asked because of what I bring to the table musically. And I want to be in mixed bands. I want to be in mixed festivals. I want to, you know, where we don't even have to talk about it anymore. It happened to me one time a few years ago at Berlin Jazz Fest. For the first time, there were a bunch of women-led bands and nobody was talking about it. It was like, nice, that's what I mean. But I think it's still a long way for that to happen more broadly, where it's not like constantly, oh, look at that, you know, how they can also like play music. That's so cool. It's like, I'm not so on board with that, while I understand that there's something that has to be done to outweigh the mostly male dominated jazz scene. But yeah, I hope that soon it can be mostly about the music and not about anything else, and about quality.
Yes, bravo. And I know from putting my show together, I even had those epiphany moments where I'm like, oh my God, this world is dominated by males, man. And this world, I mean, is specifically the jazz world or improviser world. I'm like, damn. And especially white males. And it's just, I wouldn't say that there's anything inherently wrong with that, right, except for the fact that it didn't happen yesterday and then continued on to today. This is something probably that's been going on for a long time. And I continue to do my own research and engage with people such as yourself and other folks I've had on the show to see what they think, so that it's just not me talking about it. I was like, wow, I know a lot of guys, and I mean males and cis males that are straight, that run this world.
Yeah.
Now, is that bad? Yes and no. But what's not great is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of attempts in the last decades to engage with anybody else, females, right, or otherwise, or non-binary people or trans people, or but you're right, that should be the reason. But man, Charlotte, that's a very difficult rope to walk, you know, like a tightrope is what I'm talking about here, because it's like on one level, we got to branch out, man. Yes, but you don't want to do it just to say, because, well, I'm going to have Charlotte, you know, Greve on just because she's a woman. Like, you wouldn't want me to do that.
No,
right?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking. Then I would rather not play, almost.
Right.
And I still accepted those gigs. Like, I recently found out I was in this band, and it was like, oh, because the women percentage, right, you know, and funding or whatever.
Yep.
And it's fine. Like, if the music is good, I'm all for it. It's cool. It's just like, if you ask me about an ideal situation, right, we're talking about like, what are we wishing for in the future? What would be ideal? And it would be ideal to only get asked because you play a certain way.
Right.
And if it fits the project, then wonderful, you know. And if I play in a band with only men, but I choose that because they bring a certain musical thing to the table, then that is my musical decision, you know? And I still find that the most important thing. If I have a band with only women, then only because I want that sound exactly from this woman and whatever. But then it's still about the sound and not about their gender.
Yeah. Or their sexuality or whatever.
Or sexuality, yeah.
Or race or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But yeah, the whole thing is mystifying on one level, but when you really start to talk around and ask people about their experiences, it's not that mystifying. It's very understandable how we got here. But what I keep telling people when I interview them and my audience is that I'd rather talk about this to somebody who can explain it than just to talk around it.
Right.
Like if I sat here and said, well, you know, we need more women in music, or we need more women in, you know, the culinary, I had a chef on. Well, then have a female chef on. So I did. Yeah. And I was like, what's your take? And I mean, by the way, she's very along the same lines, although in the restaurant industry, they are very, very sexist. I mean, she was getting into some really straight talk about how she's been treated as a female in the restaurant industry. And it's like, oh, like you're not a chef yet. I mean, she's 26. So she goes, but yeah, they won't let me be a chef. And she goes, it might be because I'm a woman. And like, I need to spend more time, you know. I mean, I'm just like, what? Like, what?
Right.
You have to prove yourself more than, you know, Chef Ramsay, who probably, I mean, Chef Ramsay's amazing, I guess, you know, who's just like, you know, I'm the best.
Yeah.
You're like, okay. And I'm 18 and I'm a chef. You're like, all right, then go ahead.
Totally. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And what I would like to say also is that, I see, like when I talk about my own experience, and I had like some really bad experience and whatever, but also, as I said, a lot of good experiences, even though, like, quote unquote, I work mostly with white men throughout my career so far, right? I do want to say that I understand and I know and I acknowledge that there are women and maybe younger colleagues of mine or whatever that might need a little bit more encouragement, you know, and I wanna speak to those as well and say, your voice counts just as much, and if somebody tells you otherwise, you have to tell them otherwise, you know. And I know that's not easy, and it's a process. And when I started out playing the saxophone and going to jazz school and all that, I was afraid of everybody, no matter it was a woman or a man or anything. I was just afraid and extremely shy. And over many, many years, I had to learn to build my own back, you know, and to be like, nope, that is how I do that, you know. And it wasn't easy. And I had a saxophone teacher that said very inappropriate things to me along the lines of, you're playing too female, so that's a problem. Like,
no shit.
I didn't even say that. That is actually my main story. Yeah. Wow. And I was extremely broken by that. I was like, okay. He came to a show of mine and said, tomorrow in my office, 3 p.m. I came to his office next day, 3 p.m. He was like, sit down on that couch. And he was like, so your show, it wasn't great. Also, you're playing too female and you got to get out into the concrete desert. And basically saying, play with more balls. And I was pretty young and I was like, okay. And that I needed a good amount of time to get over that because it really like bumped me over. And sure, like he was trying to use strong words and metaphors or whatever, but it was very inappropriate. And I didn't realize in that moment, I was just kind of shocked again. And so it is important that we talk about these things, and whoever is like starting in this kind of universe now, like in the music universe, that you know, there are people that experience similar things, and we're here and we're here to talk, and like I'm happy to like encourage anybody who is going down that path, and also to let them know it's possible, you know, because can speak for myself. I came from an extremely shy starting point. I was like, I suck. I can mostly play long notes. That's kind of it. And so, yeah. And I'm sorry for being here, you know. That's how I started out. And with the help of many colleagues and friends and whatever, and just like kind of like staying with it, I came to a point where I feel a lot more confident about myself and about my music, but it wasn't from day one at all. So, yeah.
It's interesting because several of the other guests I've had on, and they were female, said it wasn't so much they experienced, you know, sexism, especially not that story you told, which is that's intense. It's just they felt ignored. So their teacher, or they'd go to a jam session and they were like, hey, we'll see if we can get to you, you know, kind of thing.
Right.
So there wasn't that encouragement, go get up on stage and, you know, do your thing, or like,
right,
you know, play that solo at, you know, letter A or whatever it might be. They were just like, yeah, it was just as if I didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the transition, if I can be that bold, that we're in now, where we're learning that, you know, and we being, I guess, white males here, or any male, we're learning that, you know, like, man, I think it's okay, because somebody said it on social media when I asked people for questions. She is a bad ass about you. Feng Shenhua.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw that. I don't know him.
I think it's a her, but we'll find out, I'm sure, in the comments. And then I got this other comment for you. I have attended your concert on 16th November 2019 in Pune, Pune.
Pune.
Yeah.
Yeah, in India.
Right. Just marvelous. Maybe fall in love with jazz. Heart emoji. Thank you. No, thanks a lot for such an amazing experience.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like an Indian name. Harukesh Takal. Sorry, I'm butchering the name. I'm not great with that, but
yeah, that was a good show. It was in Pune, in India, in 2019.
Nice. Well, there you go. You changed at least one person's life. Well, and two with me.
That's good.
So maybe this. I mean, I'm not going to open another like door here, but you know, maybe if that festival in Pune like said, well, it's a woman, she's from Germany and she plays, you know, good, but you know, we want to have her because she is female. And then this one person takes the time to write a comment about you and that you turn them on to jazz.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there is something to that too. I don't know.
100%. I agree. No, I agree. You know, if there has to be this connection or this like trigger to be like, we rather hire this band because the front person is a saxophone playing woman, you know, then so be it. It's, you know, then so be it. And
right.
As long as we use that stage also to our advantage and like, as I said, transport the message and just be like, yes, look at this. I came from being extremely like, I can't do anything. Yep, I should probably stop, to being like, this is my music, this is what I wrote, this is how it sounds. Now you can deal with that, you know, and just be more confident about it and actually have people enjoy and like inspire to something new. Then that's a very positive thing. And then something worked out the right way.
Beautiful. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you again, Charlotte. And I hope you, best of luck finding an apartment. You seem to be good at that. I think you'll find something, no problem. Yeah. But I'll let you know if I'll hear of anything. Awesome. And have a beautiful evening. And thank you for being here. I really appreciate it, Charlotte.
Thank you so much for having me. It really means a lot.
All right. Talk to you later. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Constant Constance. Tune in every week for new conversations. And if you want even more, check out Andrew's Patreon for more exclusive content and additional conversations. Hosted and produced by Andrew D'Angelo. Edited and mixed by Lucy Little. Original music by Andrew D'Angelo and Maximilian Moore D'Angelo. Intro is Henrietta Weeks. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You fucking rocked it. Like she doesn't know she says podcast, right? Like she doesn't even know.